Hi, Ben from Blue Media here. In this lesson, we're going to be doing a project in After Effects called the bouncing ball. Why a bouncing ball, you might ask? Well, the bouncing ball is a great project for beginning animators. It uses a lot of the 12 principles of animation. It also teaches you a lot of techniques if you're using a program like After Effects. If you missed part 1 of our video series, I would highly suggest you go ahead and watch that first. That's learning to animate in about 10 minutes. If you didn't watch that, I'll put a link in the description below. I would highly suggest you check that out first. Okay, if you're ready to go ahead and grab your coffee, get After Effects booted up, and let's get started.
Alright, so just like in the previous video, we're going to start in After Effects with a new composition. So for each, you're going to select New Project, and then you'll go New Composition. We're going to call your composition Bouncing Ball. We're going to pick the HDTV 1080-24 preset. Black background is fine, although, we could change it if you want a different color. It doesn't really matter. I'm going to do black with a bright ball, so that way it's easy to see. If you choose to do a different color background, that's your choice. Just remember, you're going to have to pick the color for the ball that's contrasting, so it stands out against the background later. And then duration, I'm going to put 15. It's okay to go a little over. If you think it's going to be 10 seconds, maybe do 15. It's better that you have more time to work with. You can always shorten the work area and the render area, but it's a little bit more cumbersome. You have to go back and change the duration later if you end up running over. So I'm going to go up to 15. I think it's probably going to be a lot less than that, but we'll see. And hit OK. And now we have, of course, nothing here, but we do have our timeline activated. We have our composition right here. And then on the left-hand side, the bouncing ball is the only composition in here right now, and that's fine. We are going to import some things before we get started. We're going to import a reference video. So that's going to be one thing that you'll want to have on tap. I'm going to go ahead and get mine ready, and then I'm going to import it. If you do not have a reference video for a bouncing ball, you can do it by just sort of following along with what I'm doing. Just keep in mind it's going to look obviously a lot like mine, and you're not going to have the ability to kind of trace your keyframes over the video. So what I would recommend is that you find a bouncing ball on YouTube or something, and just get a little demo of it so that you can really easily do your keyframes. You can do this again without a reference, but that's not really advised if you're brand new to animating. So let me go ahead and get my reference video. To import, you're going to hit Command-I, like I for import, and then you're going to have to navigate to your video. Once you find the video, you can click on it and then hit Open, and that will bring the movie file into After Effects. Now, a movie file is a lot like a shapefile in that when you bring it into the timeline, if you were to click this and drag it into here, it's going to act like anything shape-like. I mean, you're going to have transform options in here. You can scale it, you can resize it. If you click on the little drop-down arrow just to the left of the color, you'll see there's actually audio in this case, and then transform options. And these transform options are the same options that you would have on any layering, like a shape layer, for instance. And so you have the choice here to resize it immediately or wait a little bit and determine kind of where you want it to be. I'm going to, first things first, I'm going to kind of just sort of watch the video. And yeah, it's basically going full screen. There is like a floor surface, and then it's going all the way from left to right. So in this case, I do want it to be full screen. It's pretty good. You know what? I think I'm just going to let it kind of come from the corner of the screen, because I want that bottom to be visible. Now, the other thing that's happening here that's worthy of noting is that you'll see that when the first time it hits, it's actually hitting right there, and that's fairly high on the screen. It's right around there, and then when you look over here, it's way down bottom. So I don't think the video is tilted. I actually think that the ball might have been dropped at a slight angle in relation to, where we see this wall, which would be like the horizon line. I think it's going at a slight angle. I don't really want that. I want it to be more straight. So before I do anything else, I'm going to go ahead, I'll crop out this beginning portion, which is a second long. And all you have to do to crop is to grab the left-hand side and just bring it in. And then you can move the whole video over. And now it's starting basically right where I want it to start. You know what? Let's go ahead and crop it to half a second before the ball actually drops. And that way it just gets going. And you remember how I said we did not need 15 seconds? Well, in this case, we definitely didn't need 15 seconds. It only is lasting about 4 seconds long. At this point, you could go ahead and go to composition and change your composition settings. The other thing you can do is start to use some of the hotkeys that you have available. And the first hotkey would be N, as in Nigeria. Got all those princes in Nigeria trying to offer you money. And N for end. Now I know it doesn't really work because end is spelled E-N-D, but the best way to remember it is B is for beginning and N is for end. And I know that's kind of silly, but if you hit B, it starts the work area, and then N ends the work area. Okay? Maybe, I don't know, N for nighttime. I have no idea. But I like B for begin and N for end. Okay? And that way we have kind of a full animation. And when I hit the space bar, which renders out the video, you'll see it loops right there at 4 seconds now. So this is your work area. It even says it when you highlight it. It says work area. And so again, you can set that with the hotkeys B for begin and N for end. Okay. And then I still have some space over here to work with if I want to work with it. And it looks like they just kind of have it loop. Or there's multiple drops even. That one's actually a little better in terms of being like more straight. It's weird right there. Motion blur doesn't look like it's hitting the ground. Yeah, I like the second one better. So I'm going to actually take this and move it over, but let me just teach you another hotkey. So if you're trying to truncate a clip, you can hit Alt and the bracket, left or right bracket, which are next to the P key on your keyboard, and that actually truncates based on whichever one you hit. So if you hit the left bracket, it truncates towards the left side, and then the right bracket truncates towards the right side. So I'm going to hit Alt and truncate there. And this looks like it's actually a shorter bounce, but I'll go ahead and extend it a little past my work area, and that way it's got a little bit of padding, and there we go. And that looks a little bit straighter. That'll save me some time, so I don't have to worry about adjusting the video. Okay, so that being said, you should have now the video on here. There's not much else we need to do with this right now, except for set our ground plane, and then we can make this transparent and lock it. So we're not going to really use this beyond just setting our keyframes in the beginning, and I'll explain why later. But the main reason is because we want to be able to do our own squash and stretch. We want to be able to control the exaggeration on this a little bit. What we're really using this for, this video for, is for keyframes, which are the extreme positions as it's bouncing. So that's the highest points, the lowest points. And then also we're going to use it for timing. So it helps us to set the timing for the ball, where it's supposed to be at what time. Beyond that, we're not really going to use it. Okay, we're gonna use our own artist discretion and make it this kind of what we want to make it. Let's go ahead and set our ground plane. So I'm gonna look at where it hits the ground. I'm gonna deselect the layer by clicking in the gray area away from the layer. So if I have my layer selected, click in the gray area. The reason I want to do that first is because if you were to immediately, let's say you had this selected, you were to immediately go to create a shape layer, it will actually create a mask. You see that? So I'm going to hit Command Z, which is undo, and I'm going to hit V for my selection tool. I'm going to deselect. I think one of the fastest ways, if you're already in the timeline, is just click away from the layer. I find that to be fairly easy to do. And then I'm going to select this, and that's going to create a shape layer. Okay. Oops. And I'm going to change my fill. Let's go over here. So I clicked on the fill button where it says fill options instead of the fill color. And I'm going to select this, and then it's on multiply 85%. I don't know what I was doing in here before, but After Effects saves your presets. So if it's something that you've messed with earlier, it might save it even project to project. So I'm going to make this normal, and I'm 100% opacity. So it's a nice, rich, full ground plane. And hit OK. And it's a little off, so I'm going to move it down. I'm going to use the selection tool to move it down. And in this case, I just want to kind of have it be right where it, and it is slightly at an angle, but I don't think it's a big deal. I want it to be right where it's hitting. So we're not going to do this, we're going to do this very two-dimensionally. We're not going to do it three-dimensionally. And so we're going to create a 2D ground plane. Okay. I'm going to right-click on this layer and select rename. And I'm going to call it ground. And that way I know that's my ground plane, just in case I ever get confused later. So I'm going to collapse this and lock it. And then for the video, I don't need the audio for it. I'm going to go ahead and deselect this little box right here. Just click on it. That turns off the audio. And I want it to be a little more transparent. So if you remember in the first video, we looked at the transform options, and one of those was opacity. If you don't keyframe it, this opacity, if you change it, will last the duration of the entire video. So if I change this opacity and put it at something like, 40%, it will last that entire time. Now, do I need to change the opacity in order for this to work? Well, no, I don't. The fact of the matter is that I'm going to hide this later anyways. But if you have like other things in here that seem a little distracting, or if you're working maybe with this layered on top of something else, like let's say you did have a background in there and you had objects that the ball was supposed to be bouncing on, or you have, other elements in this composition, I just want to point out that this is something you can do. So if you want to change the transparency, you can. I'm going to just lower it a little bit just so it's a little darker for this purpose so that it's not so bright. Then you could change the opacity of it. And I'm going to go ahead and collapse this and lock it. And now, because they're locked, I can't accidentally grab them and manipulate them, which is good.